praise music I have found is so vital in my walk in terms of oftentimes the musician will throw in different verses and things from the Bible, even if it's just part of a verse and it really speaks to you. That first one that we did, greater is He who is in me than he who is in the world. And the gist of that whole song, they're talking about just Satan whispering in your ear, telling you that you're a failure, you're not good enough, all the rest of it. Growing up, when my mom remarried, my stepdad was an alcoholic. Didn't know it at the time, but soon found out. Very violent alcoholic. And his big thing on the weekend was to assign jobs for us to do around the house, my sister and myself. And whilst we were doing them, by the time they were more or less done, midday Saturday, mid-afternoon Saturday, whatever it was, he'd be well and truly plastered and then come and inspect the jobs. Never went well. And his nickname for me was Half Job. And he'd come and inspect the jobs, and it was so ridiculous to the point of like weeding flower beds. I'd actually pull a line, a string line, with a stake on either end, and then cut those beds with a spade, or what do you guys call it? A shovel?
Yeah.
Spade.
Shovel.
And cut them along the string line so that they would be perfectly straight. And he would come along in his drunken state, and he'd inspect. I don't know which line he was looking at, but whenever he looked down that line, it was skewed, and he'd just be very, very heavy-handed in that. And anyways, just grew up from that, always believing that I was never good enough. It's amazing how the world can pre-program your mind. And today, even in today, years later, I'll do something work-wise. And the person I'm doing it for will look at the work and say, man, that's really beautiful, that's a work of art, that's whatever it is. And for me, it will never be good enough. There's always something that could have been done better, and that's a pre-programming. And that's why that song in particular is very, very meaningful to me. And it doesn't matter, even if those fears and failures and things are real, or if it's your reality. Even if it's your reality, it is real. Even though it may not be true, you're still dealing with it. And that little verse there, that greater is He who is in the world than greater is He who is in me than he who is in the world. It's not me anymore that needs to shine. It's Christ in me that needs to shine. And one day when we came to build the house that we're in now, when I was going to start building that house was going to be the perfect house. It was going to be flawless. And as time went on, and there were certain things that had to get rushed, and it wasn't just perfect. It was like, well, okay. And as time went on, now there's a lot of imperfections. It's not 100% perfect. Somebody else walking in the house, oh, that's beautiful. Well, it's only beautiful until somebody else walks in and picks up on a fault and says, well, that's not perfect. Even if I regard it as perfect, now perfection is not perfect. So again, like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so is perfection. What is perfection? We can strive for perfection our whole lives. And what will we be doing? We'll be striving. That's not what Christianity is about. That's not what life is about. That's not what enjoyment is about. That's not what peace is about. So this morning, as we get into Leviticus chapter 25, you realize we are, I think, 2 chapters away. 2 or 3. 2 chapters away from finishing the book of Leviticus now. It's pretty cool. As we get into this book of Leviticus, we're going to look at something called the Sabbath. And we dealt with the Sabbath previously, and it came up right in the get-go, where God gave Moses the law and said, the 7th day is going to be the Sabbath. It's a day of rest. That was a day of rest for man. Every 7 days, man gets a rest. But now we're going to look at a different Sabbath. This Sabbath is going to be every 7 years. Now, it's not man getting the rest. Man is going to rest, but it's the land that's going to get a rest. And it's a rest from not just producing, but being forced to produce. There's a rest from that. So what I want to do is I'm just going to read through verses 1 through 7, and then go back and have a look, so that the whole story is kind of in our minds before we break it down and break it up. This is going to be a combination of one, what we should have done on Thursday night with regards to a Bible exposition, and two, an application. So it's going to be a 2-in-1 kind of thing, because I worked out on Thursday night and was too tired to come in. So chapter 25 verse 1 of Leviticus says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow in your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land. A Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. What grows of its own accord of your harvest you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes of your unattended vine. For it is a year of rest for the land, and the Sabbath produce of the land shall be food for you, for you, your male and female servants, your hired man and the stranger who dwells with you, for your livestock and the beasts that are in your land, all its produce shall be for food." So here we see something with regards to God setting a timetable again. Previously, when we looked at the Sabbath, every 7th day, okay, that was derived from the creation, and on the 7th day God rested, and that is the whole premise of this, man resetting his clock, as it were. On the 7th day, take that day, put aside your work, and the work that has been spoken about is your work that produces income. Okay, it's not talking about honeydew lists and things like that. It's not a day where you just kick back and chill. If you don't have honeydews, that's fine. We seem to think that work is this unnatural thing, and we've got to do everything to get out of it, and it's a result of the curse and stuff like that. Well, what was Adam created for? Adam was created to tend the garden. Last time I looked, I love working in the garden. I love working the soil and stuff, but that's work. Pickaxe and all the rest of it. Yes, after the sin, after the fall, it got a bit harder in the sense that the weeds got bigger roots and the thorns got bigger and all the rest of it. But bottom line is there's still work to do. We want to get out of it. Jesus turned around and said there are 12 hours in a day to work. What do? We work 8 hours. No, we don't. We take an hour's lunch break in there, and we take 15 minutes in the morning, and then Human Resources tells us no, we have to have a break in the afternoon, and we've got to have this break and that break, and we've got a Facebook break, and we've lost our ability to work and work hard. It's amazing when we work hard like that, what happens at night time? You sleep hard. And we don't work during the day, so what do we do at night time? We play hard, and we wonder why our society is going to hell in a basket, as it were. I'll probably get a letter for that one. But anyways, now dealing with the Sabbath thing, building on this premise of every 7 years. 7 in the Bible, oftentimes people look at the number 7 and we think it's a perfect number because it's God's number. Okay? 7 doesn't speak of perfection. 12, the number 12 speaks of perfection. 7 always speaks of completion. It's a completion of the creation. That's the first time the number comes up. Okay? So that's what the number 7 represents. 7 to us, 7 is a unique number, even apart from the Bible. Look at the rainbow. That palette of colors, 7 colors. The notes, musical notes in a score, 7 musical notes. In the Bible, Joshua, when Joshua moved into the Promised Land, 7 years of conquering before he conquered all the enemies in the Promised Land. This number 7 comes up so many different times. The repetitiveness of the 7. Now, when God says, "Take a day off, I'm going to look after you," you would think that that's what we would do. When God said to them in the beginning, okay, every 7th day is the Sabbath day, this wasn't a normal thing. It's not like we had weekends at that time. In that time period, in that culture, culture and the cultures around them, nobody took a seventh day off, a Sabbath day off. They didn't do that. Okay? So when God instituted this with the Hebrew people, the rest of the world was sitting around looking at these guys like, what are you guys goofing off for? Why are you taking the seventh day off? And we don't understand it. How are you going to get ahead? How are you going to, don't just take the day off, work overtime. That's kind of how we look at things, right? Do we ever get ahead? No. Because the more you have, the more you want. It's not having what you want, it's wanting what you have. That's the secret to life. So, with regards to the seventh year now that we're going to deal with, God turns around and says to Moses, now instruct the people. It's not just a rabbinical thing. This is a people thing. This is for everybody. It's an instruction. And he says here, at the tail end of verse 2, I give you the land, okay? God is, when He's giving it to them, He's giving it to them not as a permanent possession, but more as, yeah, I'm giving you this land. This is what you're going to use, and I'm going to provide your income from that. It's not this is your land, you do with it what you want. We kind of have a misconception about owning land. You and I, for many of us, we own our land, or so we think. What happens when the country goes to war and an invading country comes in? Oh no, this is my land, here's the land deed. That's out the window. I've paid for it, it's mine. No, that's out the window. We don't own the land, it's not ours to own. Who owns the land? God owns the land. When He divvied it out, He said to them, okay, when you get into the land, Joshua, you divvy it out amongst the tribes. That's going to be the land that you're going to have. It's going to be a possession forever. And we're going to see now with the Jubilee how God ensures that that is a possession forever, how that comes back to those people every 50 years. It all points to it as a picture of what Christ does for us in terms of redeeming us, in terms of, if you don't understand where we're going to go to with regards to the Jubilee and the redemption in the Jubilee period, you're not going to understand the book of Revelation. It's based on these laws here in Leviticus. So here too with this land, God says, okay, I'm going to give it to you, you get to use it, but just to remind you of the fact that you don't own it, I own it. Every seventh year, it's going to rest. You don't get to farm it. What if God spoke to you and I and said to us, every seventh year, you take the whole year off. You don't go to work anymore. You resign from your job or whatever. You take the entire year off, and I will provide for you. What would your response be? I know mine would be, how? Where's it going to come from? Turn the page. So in Leviticus this will be in chapter 25. Chapter 25 in verse 20. Here God deals with this question, right? And if you say, what shall we eat in the seventh year, since we shall not sow nor gather in our produce? Then I will command, that's God speaking, I, God, will command my blessing on you in the sixth year, and it shall bring forth produce enough for 3 years. And you shall sow in the 8th year and eat all produce until the 9th year. Until this produce comes in, you shall eat of the old harvest. So what's being said here, God is saying, right, in year number 6, your harvest is going to be so big that it's going to now last for year 7 when you can't plant, and year 8, because what you plant at the end of, at the beginning of year 8, you're only going to reap at the end of year 8, so you're going to need to eat. So there's a 3-year provision there. It's a miraculous provision. So here comes faith. New Testament says, the just shall live by faith. Okay? That is a verse that bugs me. It's one of those that I struggle with. It's not God saying, you can live by faith. It's God saying, you shall. You are going to, whether you like it or not. If you consider yourself justified by what Christ did on the cross, you are going to live by faith. That's one of those Sharpie verses, those ones that you highlight with a black Sharpie so it doesn't appear in your Bible anymore. That's what I call a Sharpie verse. That's a scary verse. So Lord, you're telling me I'm going to take a year off work and you're going to provide for me in that year. Anybody want to take up on that one? And take God up on that offer. It's an amazing offer. Think about this. You get to take a whole year off. You don't stress, you don't plant, you don't go to work, you don't do anything, and God will miraculously provide for you. That's a unique thing. How often did the Jews do it? We don't have any references to the Jewish people actually applying this in the Bible times. We've got some other references to this. In one of them that I was looking up, in 1952, there's a new one of these little settlement villages, and it was called Cominiet, I think it's pronounced. And in 1952, these guys observed this sabbatical year, or this Sabbath year, and they didn't plant. And it was a question of, what are we going to do? So they observed that in the next year, when they were supposed to plant, all they had was grain that had actually been infested. The rats and the termites and everything else had gotten into the stuff. And it was this grain that was good for nothing. The seed was trashed. And the rabbis turned around and said, plant it anyway, and we'll see what happens. In the time period that it took them to go and show the rabbis the seed and get their feedback and everything, they were now 3 months later than what they should have been in planting. Well, they planted, the rains that year didn't come for 3 months. The rains were delayed. Coincidence? Everybody else that had planted 3 months prior, when they should have planted in that area, their crops were pretty much a miserable failure because the rains didn't come. These guys had a bumper harvest. So not only did they have a bumper harvest from the rotten grain, they were the only ones that really had good crops to actually pull from and put onto the market. Got on in it? Coincidence? I don't know. But that is the one time that we do see it. Unfortunately, here's what happened in the Jewish tradition with their lawmakers, with their rabbis and things. Back in 1888 to 1889, that was supposed to be this sabbatical year. Okay, it was supposed to be this year of the Sabbath, where you let your crops rest. And what was brought in was the leniency of sale ruling that the rabbis came up with. You could take your land and you could sell it to a Gentile, a non-Jewish person. And that sale would only last for a year. But in that time period, because that land belonged to the Gentile, you as the Jewish person could carry on farming it and getting the crops from it. Now the title of this morning's message was Fooling the Man Upstairs. In reading about all these things, one of the rabbis was quoted as saying, with all these workarounds, this is what it's all about. It's about fooling the man upstairs. I find it incredibly sad. Here God makes a provision and he says, you know what, you take a whole year off. The land is going to rest, but in so doing, you're going to rest as well. If you go and read about it in detail in the Bible, you'll see that it also intimates, doesn't say it blatantly, but it intimates that you're to stay at home in that time period. Don't go traveling and all the rest of it. Just stay at home and rest. What are you going to do in that 7th year? I'd suggest to you that if in the 6th year, the crop that I brought in was 3 times that of a normal year, and now I'm having this year's rest, I would spend that time saying, thank you, Lord. Because it would be in my face. Every single time I sat down to eat, I'd be eating a miraculous meal for the next 3 years. Surely at that time it would come home to you, man, God is really looking after me. And that's what God was getting across, or trying to get across to the Hebrew people, just like he did in the desert. Because remember, when he's giving them this law where we are right now, what are they eating? Manna and quail, miraculous food. God's saying when you come into the land, as a reminder every 7 years, you're going to eat miraculous food again. You and I, we get to eat miraculous food in the sense of we put our faith in Christ, the just shall live by faith, and we get to see him move every single day. I'm not talking about manna from heaven, but I'm talking about miracles that are just as big, if not bigger, in terms of how he can change us. Having a chat this morning to a lady, and she was mentioning and dealing with the drug issue that we have around us. How many of us have actually come into contact and done and delved into that world of drugs and have been redeemed, pulled out by God? That saying, therefore, but by the grace of God go I. That's what I get every time that I see or come into contact with one of these guys around town that are caught up in this and dealing with it. If it wasn't for the grace of God, that could be me. And yet, just purely by God's grace, He's pulled me out, He's redeemed me, He's saved me, He's given me this rest. So the question is then, I suppose for me and for many of us, why don't we have that rest? That's where we're going to. So here, God is saying, okay, in the 7th year, I'm going to provide for you, and the land is going to rest. In 2 Chronicles chapter 36, 2 Chronicles, you will see there what the Bible says with regards to these guys keeping this rest. 2 Chronicles chapter 36. So, in 2 Chronicles chapter 36, in verse 20, this is now dealing with the Babylonian captivity. And the Babylonians come down. It's foretold through a couple of prophets, but here in Chronicles it's actually a recording of what actually happened. So in chapter 36, verse 20, it says, "And those who escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon, where they became servants to him and his sons until the rule of king of Persia." Verse 21, "To fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths." This is what we're dealing with. Okay, these Sabbath days, these every 7 years, a year off. As long as the land, as long as she lay desolate, she kept the Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. What the Bible's saying to us here is that for 70 years worth of Sabbaths, so multiply that out. What's that? 449, I think it is. Something like that. So take 7 years, multiply that out, and when you get 70 years, that's what was owed back to God. The land was supposed to have rested for a period of 70 years. So for the entire time that they were instructed to keep the Sabbaths, they didn't. So what did God do? He allowed the Jewish people to go into captivity for a period of 70 years. At the end of 70 years, they came back out. But for that 70 years, that land lay completely desolate. And if you go back and read up, there's a lot of other literature not found in the Bible that talks about the condition of the land. The land was wild. It had turned wild again. Yes, there were a couple of places still being farmed and that, but in general, the land had reverted back to what it was. Apparently, there was lions that roamed, and it was a dangerous place to be in. It went back to being totally wild. It rested for the 7 years. In modern day, we now discover something. There's a cycle of 7 years. That if you farm land for a period of 6 years, and then you allow it to just do its own thing for a year, the weeds come up. The weeds pull nutrients from that are deep down in the ground back up to the surface. So now all of a sudden, when you plant it again in the 8th year, your crops pick up, and they grow, and they're a lot stronger. It does a lot as far as pest control goes. There's a bunch of different things that they're finding out in this whole cycle. And it works. And we don't do it. Why not? God shows us a way, and we choose not to do it. So here too, same with the Jewish way of finding a way around things and fooling the man upstairs, as it were. That's pretty much what we do with our own lives in terms of our own Christian walk. God says, hey, here's an issue in your life, take care of it. We spoke about drugs just now. Issue in my life. God puts his finger on it, take care of it. You got a choice. I can fool him, and I can still go to church on a Sunday, and I can still go and do this, and I can still do all these Christian things, and I can still have the sticker on the back of my car and wear the cross and everything else. and then secretly in my home I can still do these things, and then I wonder why I don't have peace, which is what Christianity, I think, is the core of Christianity. It's this peace. It's a peace with God, and it's a peace with my neighbor, the man next door, the person that God puts into my presence and for me to minister to. That peace not only is just peace, but it also translates to purpose. Without purpose, and especially a male, he wanders. He's not content. A man without a purpose is just wandering around. And yet, when you really come to terms with who God is in your life, you realize that, okay, this is my maker. Because he's my maker, he's created me for a purpose. God says in Jeremiah, I have a plan and a purpose for you. And until such time as I know what my purpose is, I won't have that peace. And once I start walking in that purpose that God has for me, I now find peace. That purpose doesn't have to be being a pastor in a church. That purpose can literally be, okay, I'm a father. I've got 3 little kids. My purpose is to provide for those kids right now. My purpose is to love my wife, even if she's crazy and kissing the chickens and getting back in line. But that's my purpose. It doesn't have to be that I reach out and minister to a multitude of people. It can be my purpose is to minister to my 3 kids. There's purpose right there. And my purpose can be that I minister to the person I'm looking after, the elderly person I'm looking after, the neighbor next door, whatever it is. That is your purpose in life. It doesn't have to be a big Billy Graham type thing. As great as that is, okay, I'm not diminishing that. So there's the purpose right there. And then you'll find this Sabbath day rest. Interesting, 2 Chronicles tells us that they go into captivity. God never ever deals with one issue at a time. And the best analogy I've seen of this is if you've got a pond, still pond, no ripples in the water, no wind blowing. And you take a rock and you throw that rock into the pond. It doesn't matter where you throw the rock. Eventually those ripples are going to move out and they're going to touch the shore all the way around that pond. The side that the rock is closest to, the bigger the ripples, the more impact. But those ripples will touch all the way around. When God deals with an issue, it's not just one issue that He's dealing with. So in other words, if there's a ripple in your pond, it's going to affect many people around you, everybody around you, and God's dealing with different issues. Same with when He took the Jewish people into captivity. He did it for a number of reasons, one of which was they were constantly disobeying and falling into idolatry. So He takes them to the middle of Babylon, the heart of idolatry in the known world in that time period, where there are literally hundreds upon hundreds of idols everywhere. When the Jewish people eventually leave Babylon, they never ever fall into idolatry again. They're done with their idols. It took 70 years. What's God putting His finger on you today? Is it going to take 70 years? Some of us are like, But that's what He's dealing with. And at the same time, not only was He dealing with the idolatry, He was dealing with the fact that they hadn't let the land rest. They hadn't taken the rest. They hadn't taken the time off. But what do all these things got in common? One thing, disobedience. Every single thing that He dealt with in that area comes down to one thing, and that's disobedience. The Bible, from start to finish, talks about obedience. That's the theme that runs the whole way through. Even in the life of Christ, what did Christ say when He was in the garden and He was sweating blood and He was talking to the Father? He said, Lord, please let this cup pass from me. If I don't have to do this thing, please let it pass from me. If there's another way, let it be that way. And then He turns around and He says, but not my will be done, but yours. Later on He turns around and He says, I always do what the Father asks of me. He had peace. He could lie down and sleep in a boat in the middle of a storm. He had peace. He was settled. Why don't we have that peace? Because we're not obedient. It's funny, the moment you step out of obedience, and when I say obedience you can translate to sin. We dealt with this last week in the sense that we don't want to call sin anymore. We want to turn, it's a generational curse, or it's this, or it's that. We don't want to identify and say what it is. But the moment we are not obedient, we are stepping into sin. Why? Because we're choosing to do my will as opposed to God's will. Don't tell me when you are going to do something wrong, you do not have that little, just that funny little feeling, that inkling, the touch of the Holy Spirit just putting it upon your heart. Hey, you're kind of going left when you should be going right. You have that moment, that fork in the road. At that juncture, you can turn around and say, Lord, my will be done, not yours. That's what you're doing. And at that point, it's disobedience. It's sin. It's missing the word sin, missing the mark. You've missed the mark. You've chosen not to hit where God is pointing you to. So you're going off. Turn with me now to, where was it? Sorry, don't turn there. In Deuteronomy chapter 31:10. That's where we're going. In Deuteronomy chapter 31 is literally Deuteronomy, Deuto meaning the second. It's the second giving of the law. In Deuteronomy, the book of Deuteronomy, Moses is summing up everything for the Jews before he goes. God's already told him, you're not going in the promised land, you're about to die. And Moses is summing everything up for these guys. So in the book of Deuteronomy, in chapter 31, he says here, and Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, this is what we're talking about now, at the appointed time in the year of release, at the Feast of Tabernacles, that there should ring a bell. Feast of Tabernacles. That's the same feast that's going to be reinstituted in the millennial reign when Christ comes back. So at this Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Tabernacles is also when you've gathered in your fruit. It's also your harvest. It's called the Feast of End Gathering. So at this feast, verse 11, when all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God in the place where he chooses, you shall read this law before all Israel in their hearing. So what Moses is saying here is, this law that God gives, this whole law, is going to be read audibly. Now there's another time that this happens, millennial reign. Millennial reign, Christ in Jerusalem, reigning from Jerusalem. It says that all the nations are going to gather and go up to Jerusalem, to the Holy Mountain. And you're going to do this once a year, Feast of Tabernacles. At that point, the law is not going to be read, but it's going to be written on your hearts. So this whole thing that we're reading about now, with regards to Leviticus, with Deuteronomy, everything, it's pointing to this time period, this Levitical reign, the millennial reign. But what about for you and I right now? The Bible talks about a peace that surpasses understanding. And we will quote and you'll read it. It says, and the peace that surpasses understanding. That's what God's going to give you. And that's where we read from. Well, and, what does and mean? It's joined to something else. What's it joined to? Well, just prior to that, the first part that we should be looking at in order to get that peace is, firstly, submit everything to God by prayer and fasting. And then it goes on and says, and the peace that surpasses understanding will be given to you. So, just wanting the peace, but not submitting. Remember I said to you, this thing called obedience and sin? Just wanting the peace, but not submitting and being obedient, the two don't go together. It's not going to work. It can't work. So in order to gain that peace, the peace comes from being in submission to God, in submitting to God. These guys, can you imagine what their life would have been like? Picture your life. Every 7 years, you're on holiday for a whole year. I can't even begin to imagine what that's like. That would be amazing. Every 7th day off, totally. You can focus on God and just say, thank you, Lord. It's an amazing concept. And yet, God says to these guys, I'll provide in the 6th year. You take the 7th year off. 8th year, you're going to have enough to sow. 9th year, end of 8th year, you'll be now gathering again and harvesting again. There's something else in this. Notice the restriction that he put on the people in verse 5 of chapter 25 here in Leviticus. It says, what grows of its own accord of the harvest, you shall not reap. So the landowner at that time, whatever grew from the leftover seeds that had fallen in the ground and everything else, the landowner couldn't take from that. Why? Because he already had God's provision in the 6th year. So God's provided for him. So the 7th year, that in this time of no reaping and harvesting and that, he's not allowed to harvest. But the person that is allowed to harvest is anybody who needs food. So in that 7th year, what's effectively happening? The landowner, or the guy with the money, the goods, is the same as the guy that hasn't got. Everybody's brought down to the same playing field. And he who needs goes and gets. And the landowner cannot say, hey, this is posted. I've got purple painted on my posts and things like that, like we do here in Texas. It's no trespassing. None of that happens. Why? It's not his land, it's God's land. And that's the biggest and the neatest thing that I've seen come out of this, the Jewish way of thinking in that. It's all God's. Everything I have belongs to God. I get to take what I need and what He wants me to use for something else. That's where the obedience and the trust comes in. You see, if everything I have belongs to Him and He puts it on my heart to help somebody else out, it's not like, hey, you can do this. Granted, I can if I want to, or I can be disobedient. But He's putting it up on my heart, and there's a need there. I get to meet that need. It's an act of obedience, and it's an act of trust, because immediately I'm going to say, well, Lord, if I meet that need, what about me? What happens in the 7th year? Where am I going to get from? And God's saying, I'll meet your needs as well. If I can meet somebody else's needs through you, I can meet your needs as well. That's what's being said. And now the just shall live by faith, and will have peace about it. It's amazing to me that every time I meet people who are struggling in their walk, they'll turn around and it's the same things. I've lost my peace, and I've lost my joy. That is the two things that get said to me time and time again. And I've got to bite my lip. I'm learning to do this. I haven't mastered it yet. I've got to bite my lip in the sense of I want to say what's right needs to be said immediately. It's okay, so what you're doing wrong. But when a person comes to you and says, I'm just struggling with my walk, and I've just lost my joy, and I've lost my peace, and the last thing you want to do is stick a knife and turn it a little bit, and you've got to be diplomatic about it. And I'm not very diplomatic, but honestly, that is what needs to be said. So what are you doing wrong? Why haven't you got a peace and why have you lost your joy? You have to go back. Where's the first time that this is mentioned in the Bible? Adam. Adam walked with God in every evening, basically, it says. In the evening, Adam met with God and he walked with Him. The day that Adam sinned, what happened? God came, He was there, God was there, same place as always. Adam wasn't. Adam was hiding in the bushes. And God says to him, Adam, where are you? Not as in, I can't see you. I don't know where you are. God knew exactly where He was. He was hiding in the bushes. He knew why He was hiding in the bushes. But He says to Adam, Adam, where are you? Adam, where are you at in your walk? What's going on? Why have you lost your peace? Why aren't you here to walk with me? It wasn't for God to find out where Adam was. It was for Adam to find out where he was. And that's what God says to us today. Where are you at? I'm here. I'm waiting. I'm ready to go for the walk with you. Where are you at? The peace that surpasses understanding. There's another verse, the God of peace. That's what He's known as. Shalom. That's what Christ is called, the God of peace, the God of shalom. So this peace that surpasses understanding. It's funny because the world will tell you, man, if you take Sunday off and you rest and you go to church, you could be getting in overtime. You could be earning money and more. Forget about the stupid thing called Christianity. You could be getting ahead. And it doesn't line up with this peace that surpasses understanding. And it's funny as well that when you really start digging into the things of God, how all of a sudden, how many of the things that we strive for, all of a sudden they don't have much meaning anymore. and you don't need them anymore. I don't need the speedboat. I don't need the new truck. I don't need the this. I don't need the that. And all of a sudden that noose that I put around my own neck is not there anymore. Now I don't need the overtime either. And all of a sudden I have the shalom, the peace. The peace that surpasses understanding. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father God, we thank you so much, Lord, that you have made provision. You've made provision for us to rest. You've made provision for the land to rest, but you've made provision for us to come back to you. Lord, the peace that surpasses understanding by being obedient. May that be evident in our lives. May we be acutely aware of that, Lord. May we be acutely aware of the decisions and the choices that we make. Lord, that they're not just arbitrary choices, but they actually, just as Jesus put it, if you're not for me, you're against me. A bold statement, a statement that is ruffles feathers, that is not enjoyed by all, but is so true. It's either one or the other. Lord, may that not be in our lives. May there not be grey in our lives. May our lights either be on or off, just as you said in Revelation. I wish that you were either hot or cold. And when we're lukewarm, that you'll vomit us out. May we have an understanding of how seriously you take us. Just as seriously as when you said to these people in this time period, let the land rest, and they didn't, and you led them into captivity. You allowed them to go into captivity for 70 years, be slaves to somebody else for 70 years, so that the land could rest. Lord, may we realize how seriously you take this thing, how seriously you and how jealously you protect and look after us, if only we would listen. Lord, may we take the Sabbath rest and come back to you. May we look around and see your provision and just acknowledge and see how much you actually do for us and care for us and look after us, that we may truly just enter into a rest with you. Regardless of what the economy is saying, regardless of what our bills are saying, regardless of what society is saying to us, may we know that we are in the palm of your hand. Lord, your word tells us that your children don't go begging for bread. You provide for us, just as you provide for the birds of the air and the animals of the field that neither reap or harvest. May we have that confidence with you, Lord. Lord, we thank you for your faithfulness and your goodness. In Jesus' name, amen. Close up with last time of worship.